All right. So, talk about stress, right? Usually, we do our weekly webinars on the Zoom platform, and this time we're trying something new. We're trying YouTube Live. So, this is going out live over YouTube. Obviously, it's going to be archived for watching later. And what I'm talking about today is I'm doing an open call. So every week I do a call with my certified mental wellness coaches. We teach a course through Marietta College, where I got my sports medicine degree. We teach a course to educate people to become certified mental wellness coaches. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. And a lot of mental wellness is stress management, and not in the way that you think, not meditation, not mindfulness, not trying to get people to zen out. Those are all important things. And we do talk about that in the mindset module. But what we really talk about is the fact that the stress that we're under, the psychological stress, relationship stress, financial stress, political stress, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, these are all things that don't just stress out our brain, stress out our entire bodies. And because this month is April is Stress Awareness Month, we decided it would be a good idea to have this open call. We invite our coaches to come in, but we also invite everybody else to come in if they want to, to follow on YouTube Live. So here's what we're going to talk about. You can see on the screen right now the hidden stress solution, exploring the gut-brain axis in the science of stress resilience. So we're going to talk about the science of stress. We're going to talk about your second brain, which is a really, really important but underappreciated aspect of the whole stress response. We consider your gut to be your second brain. It's the source of the majority of your neurotransmitters, like serotonin for happiness and dopamine for motivation and GABA for relaxation, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of what we talk about in our course, Certified Mental Wellness Coach course, is harnessing the gut, harnessing that second brain to change how the brain in your head, your first brain, feels and performs and shows up in the world. A big part of that second brain is what you see here, number 3, your microbiome, the trillions and trillions of bacteria that are in your gut that are sending these neurosignals. So we're talking about neurotransmitters. We're going to talk about short chain fatty acids. We're going to talk really about how you can improve your resilience, which is your ability to handle stress from the inside out. I say this all the time, that when we talk about stress, and I've written, more than a dozen books about stress in different ways, about cortisol, about mental fitness, about this psychological metric that we call psychological vigor. Vigor is the opposite state of burnout. So I've been writing and educating about this for a long time. A lot of what I say is that we can't control the stress that's out there in the world. We can't control the traffic jam. We can't control the jerk that you ran into at the meeting. We can't control the news. We can't control that. But what we can control is our body's response to all of that. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to end with, I want to talk to you about the science and the biochemistry and the research and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, what people really care about is this, number 5. What are the practical solutions? What are the takeaways? What are the things that I can actually do in my life today? Like by the end of this call, as soon as you get off the call and you hit end, you're going to be able to go and do some of these things to improve your stress resilience across what we call the gut-brain axis. Okay, and they're really meaningful, right? Meaning they will change your life. Doing things in the gut and across the gut-brain axis, you'll feel them. You will be in a better mood. You will have better energy. You'll be able to sleep better. And that's going to get you into a virtuous cycle of feeling better the next day, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's what I mean by meaningful. They're going to make meaning in your life. So you're going to show up in a better way at the end of this hour that we're going to be together than you were before. Okay, so let's jump into that a little bit. So here's a little bit. If you don't know who I am, here's my background: PhD in nutritional biochemistry. I've taken that biochemical training, and nowadays what I do is sometimes called nutritional psychology, because it's the idea of what are we eating, or what are we doing, or how are we moving our bodies, or what are we feeding our mindset? How does that change our biochemistry? How does it change our cortisol levels, body's primary stress hormone? How does it change our neurotransmitters? How does it change our inflammatory markers? But then how does that biochemistry change our psychology? How does all of that change our mood, or our stress levels, or our resilience, or our mental focus, or our irritability, or et cetera, et cetera? So that's what we're going to talk about here. You can see all this other stuff: Olympic Committee, more than a dozen books translated into a whole bunch of different languages. You can see here on the left-hand side, there's this little shield, Marietta College Certified Mental Wellness Coach. I'll talk more about that on the next slide. And you can see this house, this big blue colonial in Plymouth, Massachusetts. That's where we run our wellness center. So I'm in my home office in that building, and we run retreats here. Right, we'll bring people in. We run it sort of bed and breakfast style. So people come in, they learn how to eat healthily, they learn how to sleep, they learn how to move their bodies, they learn how to relax in terms of mindset and gratitude practices. And we do breath work, and we do cold plunges, and we do red light therapy, and we do proprioception training, and we do all kinds of different things here. But we also do it all online, so you don't have to come here and visit us in person in Plymouth, Massachusetts. It's a lovely place to visit, especially now that the weather's getting nicer. But you can also visit us online like you're doing right now. So this course that we teach, where every week it's coaches, but this week it's also for everybody, because it's we're celebrating Stress Awareness Month. In that coach training course, you learn all this stuff. You learn the science, you learn the practice, so that it can be good for you personally, but then you can build a whole business around helping other people feel and perform their best by teaching them about all the things we are going to talk about today around the gut-brain axis. So you can find out more about this kind of stuff. Our program has been endorsed by a variety of different third-party organizations. So I mentioned we run it at Marietta College through the sports medicine program, but it's been endorsed by all these organizations: the American Institute of Stress, the American College of Sports Medicine, the American Nutrition Association, the National Association for Nutritional Professionals, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very comprehensive program. It's about 20 hours of content to go through, in terms of watching the videos and taking the quizzes, and reading some of the special reports, and the things like this, like the mental fitness book. The course is really based on this book, which is about improving your mental fitness through what we call the brain-body biome, which is some of the things we're doing in the brain, in your head, some of the things we're doing in your gut, your second brain, some of the things we're doing in your heart, your third brain, some of the things we're doing in your immune system and your vagus nerve. And that's the axis. That's how the signals traverse between those, across those different brains. Here's our center. Very, like I said, very nice place to visit. Three waves. But the whole idea here is that this is a new paradigm. It's a new way of thinking about mental wellness and mental fitness and stress management and stress resilience and burnout versus vigor, or said another way, languishing versus flourishing. There's all kinds of ways we talk about this, but most people just talk about being stressed out or exhausted or just feeling blah, right? Those are the actual words that we use in our day-to-day vocabulary. But the way to solve those problems is this new paradigm. It's the new paradigm of how you feel is not just in your head, it's also in your gut, and it's also in your heart, and it's also in your immune system, and it's et cetera, et cetera. And so by understanding the biochemistry at the level that we do, and understanding how that biochemistry drives the psychology, we can meet you wherever you are on this. What you see on the screen right now is what I call the mental wellness continuum. You might be low on this continuum, struggling. You might be a 2 on a scale of 1 to 10, and you hear me talking about people who are thriving, and Olympic athletes, and high-powered executives, and people who are killing it every day. And if you're a 2, that's not even in your bandwidth, right? There's like you can't even conceive of that, because it's so far out of the ordinary for you. We're not going to talk to you about becoming a 9 or a 10 if you're a 2. we're going to talk to you about becoming a 3 or a 4 or a 5 and feeling normal again, right? Feeling like your old self. That's something that is within your bandwidth. It is something that you can conceive of. And we're going to go step by step by step. Most people are actually here. Most people that we encounter in the world are 5 or a 6. They're not depressed necessarily. They don't have anxiety disorders, but they're also not thriving, right? They're not killing it every day. They just feel kind of blah, right? They're a little bit tired during the day. They're a little bit restless and anxious at night. They just feel kind of blah, like I was saying before. That blah person, it might be typical for a lot of people, but it's not normal. That's not the normal human condition. And we want to say to those people who feel blah, hey, let's get you to be a 7 or an 8 or a 9. And then once you get to be a 9, you might think, if you're a 5 right now, you might think, boy, when I get to be a 9, that's the promised land. But when you get to be a 9, you're thinking about how you can become a 9.1 or a 9.2 or a 9.3, and you're thinking about how can I get the competitive edge and thrive? How can I become the best version of myself? And that's what this all is about. It's not just in your head how you feel. It's in your gut. It's in your heart. These play a major role. These other brains, the second brain and the third brain, play a major role in how the first brain in your head performs. And the best part about it, there's so many natural, really effective, really impactful and meaningful things that we can do that are pretty easy to plug into your life to move us up that mental wellness continuum. And it's this idea of harnessing all of those three brains. And the really cool thing about it, I talked about this earlier this morning on another webinar that I did. Each of these brains is uniquely perfect at what it does, but they're different kinds of stress resilience. So you can see here your head brain is the thinking brain. It's logical. It's how you solve problems. It's your memory. It's making to-do lists and things like that. Whereas your gut brain, your sensing brain, is more about instincts and intuition. And that's where we get the terminology around gut feelings, right? That's information. If we can harness what that brain is really good at, it really amplifies what the first brain is really good at, right? So if you're only thinking of stress as a brain thing, you're really coming at it from the wrong perspective, right? You have an inaccurate framing of how we can level up your overall lifestyle. And similar with the third brain, the heart. This is our feeling brain. It's more about it, emotional connections. It's about your passions. It's about people say follow your heart, right? Trust your gut, follow your heart. These are different ways of thinking about the information that is coming from those other brains, and all that information traverses from the gut to the head, from the heart to the gut, et cetera, through what we call the axis. And the axis is that communication network. Some of the signals that I'll be talking about are biochemical signals. They might be neurotransmitters like serotonin that are made in the gut. 90% of your serotonin. We know that if we increase the serotonin in your gut, you're going to be happier in the brain in your head. And so that signal traverses that axis. I'll tell you this right now, in case I forget to tell you when I get to those slides. It's not like the serotonin gets made in the gut and leaks out from the gut into the bloodstream, and then the blood carries it up to the brain and you're happier, right? It doesn't work that way. But we do know that having more serotonin in your gut does make you more happy in the brain. And it probably is because there are these molecules called cytokines that can get across the blood-brain barrier. There are nerves like the vagus nerve that I'll talk about in a little bit that can get some of that signal, that some of the signal can traverse across your immune system. So all of these different pathways, your circulatory system, your nervous system, your endocannabinoid system, your immune system, etc., those are all pathways by which we can amplify the signaling from the gut to the brain and from the brain to the heart, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a really, really new paradigm. It's a new way of thinking about how we feel and how we perform. And that's important because it's important for you to understand that it's a new scientifically based paradigm, right? That we have the data to show how we can modulate and amplify some of these signals, because that's important because it's not intuitive. It doesn't make a lot of sense if somebody came to you and this is the first time you're hearing somebody say about it. It doesn't make a lot of sense for these bacteria in my gut to influence my mood. How does that work, right? I'm going to explain to you how that works. But the bacteria in your gut affect a lot of things, not just your mood. This is a little infographic that I use a lot when I'm teaching my students about how much the bacteria affects not just your brain, which we're going to focus on today, but so many other aspects of what's happening in your body: depression, anxiety, autism, Parkinson's. You can go down the list. Some of them do make sense, right? You could say like, oh, if the bacteria in my gut are out of balance, they might influence gut things like colon cancer or ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease or irritable bowel syndrome or something like that. That's logical, right? Something changed in my gut, something affects in my gut. But what happens in your gut doesn't stay in your gut. It does permeate out through the rest of your body through some of the pathways that I just mentioned. So you see some of these psychological conditions, you see neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's and things like that. And then you see metabolic conditions like obesity and diabetes. Your gut bacteria influence in large part what happens body and mind throughout your entire lifespan. So much so, right? This isn't just an esoteric academic sort of a thing. This is something where you can see here. This is an article that I pulled from the Wall Street Journal, right? A business newspaper, December 21st, 2020. What was happening in the world at that time was that the world was shut down. People were under a lot of stress. And the title of that article was "Feeling Depressed. Bacteria in your gut may be to blame." And this new studies subtitle: "New studies point to the trillions of organisms in the human microbiome as playing an unexpectedly huge role in our well-being." So this is a mainstream conservative business newspaper talking about the bacteria in your gut affecting your mood, affecting your mental performance, affecting your health. I have on the next slide, I've got just a couple of quotes that I pulled from that article. I'm not going to go through all of these. You can go back and read them in the replay. In fact, if you go to my website, doctalbot.com, we make all kinds of things available for free. I'm going to post this in the community area of askdrshawn.com so that all the coaches have access to all these slides. If you'd like to have access to them, you can get in touch with us and we can make sure that you get a copy of them as well, so you can have it in your personal library. But a lot of research, scientific articles. I'm going to share some of those with you as we go through. Mainstream media, in terms of Wall Street Journal and other sorts of magazines and publications that are starting to talk about this. You see books coming out talking about 2 brains and 3 brains. One of them here is my mental fitness book. But lots of really good evidence is coming out to make this a mainstream conversation. I'm going to try to summarize the main findings for you with a clinical trial that my group did. Oh, gosh, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. The what we did in this trial was we got to hold on one second. I want to look at something in the chat room. Okay, let's see. Oh, I see what somebody is saying. My live picture is covering some of the slides. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can change that. We'll look into that later. Thanks for that comment. So this is a trial that we did where we recruited people who were moderately stressed, right? People who had lots of things to do in the day, people had busy lives, people didn't get 8 hours of sleep, typical like tired, stressed, depressed kind of a person. These are the people who feel kind of blah. Like I was describing before. We had them go on a supplement regimen that gave them specific strains of probiotic bacteria, what we call psychobiotics. We gave them prebiotic fibers. We gave them nutrients to help prime their immune system, so that aspect of their axis was efficiently carrying the signals from their gut up to their brains, etc. And what we found was, over the course of just a month, right, we supplemented them for 4 weeks, and compared to a placebo group, this is what we saw: increases in good bacteria. So their gut changed. An increase, 28% higher lactobacillus, that's one category of good bacteria. 30% higher bifidobacterium, that's another category of good bacteria. They're good for different reasons that I might get into as we go through this seminar today. We have something called a composite score, which is kind of an average of what your gut is doing. We're looking at good bacteria, bad bacteria, ratios between them, and things like that. So long story short, their gut bacteria, their microbiome was better on a number of different parameters. But who cares? Nobody woke up on day 29 of that 28-day, 4-week trial and said, "Oh, my microbiome feels really good today," right? You don't feel that. What you feel is the result of your microbiome being better. So because your microbiome is better, you're making more serotonin, so you're happier. You're making more dopamine, so you're more motivated. You're making less of inflammatory molecules like certain cytokines, and so you feel less irritable. You felt less agitated. You're able to get a better night's sleep, and so that cascades into you feeling better the next day. And so what people felt, because their microbiome was better on the left-hand side, what they felt was a better psychological mood state. So lower tension, lower depression, lower anger, lower fatigue, lower confusion, and then higher vigor. I said a few minutes ago, vigor is the opposite of burnout. So this could have been lower burnout, but we measured it as higher vigor. So people felt better. So we've presented these kind of data at different scientific conferences, American College of Sports Medicine conference, the Experimental Biology Conference, all the big nutrition lifestyle conferences out there in the world. We've been presenting at. We've been publishing some of these in peer-reviewed journals. And when we started doing this work, 7 years, 8 years, 10 years ago, it was really, really novel, really, really cutting edge. And I'd go into rooms sometimes and say, "How many people have ever heard of the microbiome?" And a couple hands would go up, and they'd be it'd be the nerds. Like, I see you guys there. Nowadays, microbiome and gut-brain axis is, I wouldn't say it's mainstream, but it sure as heck is getting more and more popular. And part of that is because you're seeing more specific strains of probiotic bacteria coming out. So this one right here, you can see Cerebiome. That's a particular blend of 2 psychobiotic bacteria. I'll talk about those specific strains as we go through here. This one, Bifizen, is 4 different strains of psychobiotic bacteria, been shown to help with stress levels and sleep quality and things like that. This one here, it actually is manufactured by a company not too far from where I am. They're right in Boston. It's a specific strain of bacteria that increases the production of GABA. That's the body's primary relaxing neurotransmitter. So you take this, and it really helps you with your stress levels and your sleep quality and things like that. But now we're seeing all these specific strains of bacteria that are in this category that we call psychobiotics. And that's giving us a lot more tools to bring to bear on this problem, because sometimes you might want something to help with your sadness, right? Your depression. And there's a strain for that. There's a strain for anxiety. There's a strain for stress resilience. There's a strain for sleep. So you get the idea. We're getting a lot more sort of precision nutrition in order to be able to really, really sort of target. And so there's one aspect of, we can take several of these strains together and get an overall stress resilience benefits, or you can get very targeted and say, this one's for mood, this one's for tension, this one's for irritability, that one's for, that kind of stuff, which is really cool, because it's really bad out there. The next couple of slides, are just statistics about how stressful the world is right now, how many mental wellness problems there are, who it's affecting, and it's really affecting young people. People under the age of 30 are really in a bad place right now. So again, if you want to get these statistics and have these slides in your library, go to either of these websites. So I'll mention these a couple of times as we go through. DocTalbot.com/free. We have a lot of really good information there. DocTalbot.com/level up. This is an ebook that I've done. So you can go. I would love it if you went and bought my mental fitness book. You can find it wherever books are sold. But I also have a lot of free resources. This Level Up a resource is a free ebook that really dives into nootropics, things that are brain boosters, natural brain boosters, adaptogens, things that are herbs that we can use to help modulate our response to stress, things like psychobiotics, which are the kinds of bacteria I talked about on the last slide that can really help with different psychological outcomes. So if you want to get that level of detail, you can absolutely go and find go and find those resources. But if you look at some of these statistics, it's dismal out there. Lots of people are stressed. Lots of people are not feeling the way they want to feel. Lots of people are spending lots and lots of money on sort of feel better products. And I shouldn't say they're feel better products. They are feel less bad products. So painkillers, antidepressants, anti-anxiety drugs, what we call anxiolytics, things that help us feel less bad, because we all feel pretty bad right now. And that doesn't even count, the junk foods that we use to self-medicate with, or, alcohol or marijuana, or, any of that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to like badmouth any of those solutions, but they're not at the bullseye of what the problem is, right? They're maybe on the target, right? They certainly change the way you feel, but they don't get you to level up. They don't get you to be the best version of yourself. They don't get you to move up that mental wellness continuum in the way that doing a gut-brain axis intervention might be able to do. And we're going to talk about what some of those interventions are. So all those slides. If there's a silver lining here, you guys, the silver lining is that it's getting so bad out there in terms of stress and depression and anxiety and just people feeling blah, that people are talking about it, especially the younger people, especially people who are in the generation of my kids, who are in their mid-20s now. They're the ones who are actually starting to talk about this and actually starting to make this a national conversation. You're reading about it in mainstream magazines. You're seeing it all over social media. Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and all that kind of stuff are openly talking about mental wellness issues. And that's a change from when I was their age, where you didn't talk about that kind of stuff. The only mental wellness issue that you ever talked about was how stressed you were, as a badge of honor, that you were very stressed because you were working so hard and you had the nose to the grindstone. And that's changing, which is really, really good. I am trying to change that conversation by talking about it from a biochemical perspective, so that we can say, you know what, having a mental wellness challenge, not being okay, is okay, because it's a biochemical thing. It's a microbiological thing. It's an immune system thing. And if we sort of shift that language around what's actually happening in your body and in your gut and in your heart and in your immune system and in your all the rest, and we can change that, it makes it easier for a lot of people to gravitate towards. So if there's a silver lining, that it's becoming a national conversation, and really an international conversation in a lot of ways, and that's starting to translate into a market economy. So this is data from the Global Wellness Institute that I've been an ambassador of for several years. This is 2019 data. So this is right before the pandemic. The mental wellness industry globally was about $121 billion, right? That's a pretty sizable industry. But then the pandemic hit, and the mental wellness category of the overall wellness industry was the only one that grew across the pandemic. You can see some of the other categories that the Global Wellness Institute sort of quantifies. There's a beauty category, there's a physical activity category, which is like gyms and things like that. There's healthy eating category, which also encompasses weight loss. You can see mental wellness up here. So in 2019, it was about $121 billion. Now it's $181 billion because it's growing and it's becoming more of a mainstream understood public health sort of a thing, but maybe not in the way that you think. It's not just about zenning yourself out. It's not just about stress management anymore. It really is more holistic. And these are the three main bullet points. It's an active process, it's integrated and holistic in nature, and it's non-clinical strategies. People are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and they're sick and tired of trying the pharmaceutical approach, right? A synthetic antidepressant isn't getting somebody to where they want to be. Lots of people, millions and millions of people have tried what's been on offer in terms of antidepressants and anxiolytics and painkillers and et cetera, and it hasn't helped them in the way that they needed the help. And that is both a problem and an opportunity, because what we're not taught. So I just told you what we're talking about in terms of what mental wellness really is. It's an active process. It's integrated and holistic. It's non-clinical. It's not about mental illness. It's not about curing depression, which is more precisely termed major depressive disorder, MDD. It's not about treating generalized anxiety disorder. It's not about schizophrenia. It's not about curing autism, right? Those are all diseases. That's not what we're talking about here. That would be this x-axis, right? Mental illness, low or high. What we're talking about is this y-axis, the up and down axis, this dual continuum model. What I focus on is this axis between languishing or burnout and flourishing or vigor. This is the axis between feeling crummy at the bottom and feeling amazing at the top. That's what mental wellness is all about. And specifically, that's what mental fitness is all about. Mental fitness is the higher end of that. Mental fitness would be another word for flourishing or another word for vigor. That's what people want. And the coolest thing about it, having done this now for more than 20 years, when somebody achieves vigor, they go, yes, that is exactly what I've been looking for. That's exactly what I've been missing. This is how I want to feel for the rest of my life. Like, it's that kind of a meaningful change in your life. And the cool thing about it is that vigor is something that every culture around the world talks about and has been talking about for thousands and thousands of years. So when I talk about vigor and flourishing in sort of a Western science way, where we're looking at biochemistry and psychology and things like that, we can call it mental and physical energy. When you look at it from a traditional medicine perspective, traditional Chinese medicine would look at it and would call it qi, right? The life force in your body. Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Indian medicine, would look at that and call it prana, right? It's this idea of your life force, your vitality. We just use different words and different ways of measuring it when we talk about it from a Western scientific perspective. But the thing that's cool about that is that we can look back at TCM or Ayurveda that have a 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years of history, and we can look and see, how did they use ginseng? How did they use lychee? How did they use green tea? How did they use ashwagandha? How did they use turmeric? How did they use any of these herbals? And we can see how they use them traditionally. Then we can apply modern scientific techniques to say, like, well, what's in those? What are the bioactive compounds, and how can we concentrate those, and how can we bring to the fore the bioactives and get rid of the other stuff that we don't want, so we can have more of a natural approach to improving resilience across this entire gut-brain axis. So that's the kind of work that I do, and it's really cool to try to bridge those two worlds, the traditional medicine with the modern science, because there's so many people that are looking for that now, because it's more holistic with how the whole body works. Here's an example of that. Where a lot of people find themselves right now in the world, and this is very important to talk about during Stress Awareness Month, is stuck in what we call sympathetic drive. When we're having a stress response, we're firing the sympathetic nervous system. So what you see on the screen right now are the two sides of your nervous system. The sympathetic side, which you can think of as your fight or flight response. That's your foot on the accelerator. That's when you're stressed out and you're going and you're driving and you're on a deadline and you're zzz. That's the sympathetic side. The opposite of that, or not so much putting your foot on the brake, but taking your foot off the gas, that's the parasympathetic side. That's sometimes we call that the rest and digest side of your nervous system. Where a lot of people these days find yourself is stuck in sympathetic drive, and you're not able to shift down or take your foot off the gas and get yourself coasting into rest and digest, into parasympathetic. And that's a problem because then you don't sleep right. Then you can't calm down, and your mind is continually racing. Let me give you an example, and you can tell if you're one of these people who's stuck in sympathetic drive. You've been going all day, and maybe you've been fighting daytime fatigue, right? You're stressed out, you're dragging yourself through the day. You might be irritated, you might be anxious, you might be just going all day long, but you might be fighting the fact that you're also a little bit tired. You get to the end of the day and you think to yourself, wow, I've been tired all day. I just can't wait to wind down and get a good night's sleep. But as soon as your head hits the pillow, what happens? Your mind starts going and you start ruminating about what happened throughout the day that you just got out of. You start thinking about what you have to do the next day that is still to come. You start thinking about the problems and revisiting the argument that you had or the dislike that you got on social media. That's being stuck in sympathetic drive. And the outcome of that is that you don't get a good night's sleep. You don't go through REM the way you're supposed to, so your brain can't recover. You don't go through deep sleep the way you're supposed to, so your body can't recover. So you wake up the next morning and you just, rinse and repeat, so to speak. That's where so many people are. And it's slowly breaking our bodies down. It's breaking down our muscles. It's breaking down our brains, our neurons. It's breaking down our immune systems. Every single tissue in the body responds in a catabolic way to that oversympathetic drive because we can't get into the rebuilding phase of parasympathetic drive. Every single tissue breaks down in the body except your belly fat. Belly fat grows in response to that because of cortisol, because of adrenaline, because of a whole bunch of things I don't have time to get into. But the moral of the story, if you will, is that we need to teach our bodies how to shift. It's not about being in parasympathetic all the time either, right? We don't want to be sitting around as a calm cucumber 24 hours out of the day. We want to be able to shift into sympathetic when we need to go and shift into parasympathetic when we need to recover. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about getting the gut-brain axis in the right balance is partly about this. But this is about your nervous system. You can see up here cranial nerves. The cranial nerves, especially the 9th and 10th cranial nerves, which is your vagus nerve, innervate lots of really important tissues. Innervate your heart, innervate your lungs, innervate your gastrointestinal system, your liver, your etc. So we can harness that. We can do things around the vagus nerve to help us shift out of sympathetic into parasympathetic. So you can hum. So, if you're a yogi and you practice yoga, sometimes you'll start or end your yoga practice with a mantra, right? And it might just be, I'll just do the stereotypical one, which is Om. That humming can actually help to activate and tone the vagus nerve. Deep breathing can activate and tone the vagus nerve. When we do that, it's using the lungs to change what is happening in the heart. It's using the lungs and that vibration of the sound that you're making to change what is happening in the gut, change what is happening in the brain. So that's a hardwired connection where we can slow our heart rate. We can change our level of inflammation. We can change our digestive performance. We can actually change the integrity of our gut lining. There's so many things we can do by activating the vagus nerve. Deep breathing does it. Humming does it. Singing does it. Being physically active does it. So, the movement of the body, rhythmic moving will do that. Here at 3 Waves, we have a number of devices where we can electrically stimulate the vagus nerve. We can tone the vagus nerve with vibrations. There's things we can do around this concept called proprioception, which is getting your body to listen and become in tune with the different signals around your breathing rate and your heart rate, and the flowing of your blood and things like that. So there's all kinds of ways we can use the nervous system to change the signaling around the gut-brain axis. Here's another graphic that is demonstrating that. So the vagus nerve is basically think of it as a hardwired connection from your brain all the way down to your gut. And the signals go both ways, right? It's not just a stress signal going from your brain down to your gut. It's signals going from the gut up to the brain. In fact, if you were to measure those signals, 9 out of 10 of those signals are going gut brain, versus one of those out of 10 signals is going brain gut. So the vagus nerve really is a super highway of body signals going up to the brain. And if we can manage those body signals, the heart signals, the lung signals, the gut signals, the circulatory signals, if we can manage those, it can really change what's happening in the brain, in our head, in our first brain. So there's all kinds of things around the nervous system that we can do. And the vagus nerve is just one of those pathways. Let's shift gears a little bit, right? Think of these biochemical signals that I talked about at the top of this call: neurotransmitters, short chain fatty acids, cytokines, cellular signaling molecules that can be inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. Those all can originate in the microbiome. So the microbiome, this collection of trillions of bacteria in the gut, they're doing a lot. They're modulating your nervous system. They're protecting against pathogens, because 70% of your immune system resides in your gut and has a minute by minute, well, millisecond by millisecond communication between your immune system cells and your microbiome. So the microbiome is educating your immune system. It's orchestrating and administrating and directing everything that your immune system does. The microbiome is making vitamins. It's making short chain fatty acids. When you feed your microbiome fiber, the microbiome will eat that fiber, the bacteria eat that fiber, and a nice side stream of that, the fermentation of that fiber, is production of these short chain fatty acids. I was just reading a paper this morning that came out in one of the Nature journals, one of the top scientific journals in the world, about how modulating the production of short chain fatty acids in the microbiome might be able to cure or prevent different autoimmune system diseases like type 1 diabetes and things like that. So like there's a feel good aspect to this, right? Which is why we're talking about it during Stress Awareness Month. But there's also just an overall health performance aspect to it, and potentially a longevity aspect to what you're doing at the level of the microbiome. And this is important because we know that there's a lot of stuff happening at the level of the microbiome, and if we can do it the right way, if we can modulate what's happening at the level of the gut bacteria, it doesn't just change the gut bacteria. It doesn't just change the gut lining. It doesn't just change your inflammatory protocol. It permeates out into the entire rest of the system. So let me say it this way. You cannot be a healthy human without a healthy microbiome. You simply can't, right? We didn't know this 10 years ago. We sure as heck didn't know it 20 years ago, but now we know it today. And the thing that really makes that important isn't just the science. It's the fact that your microbiome is amazingly modifiable. We can change what's happening in the level of the microbiome every single time we eat. So when I pick up this kombucha and I take a drink of it, I'm getting the benefits of that fermentation milieu, that gamish of fermentation ingredients in that kombucha is affecting my microbiome right now. and we do that meal to meal to meal, day to day to day, month to month to month, we can have changes in the architecture of what's growing there, good guys versus bad guys, sort of an oversimplification, but just to make a point. But we can also have a change in what they're producing. So when we look at the microbiome, sometimes we're looking at who's there. Are there more lactobacillus? Are there more bifidobacterium? Are there more Akkermansia? But we're also looking at what they're doing. Are they producing more short chain fatty acids? Good thing. Are they producing less inflammatory cytokines? Good thing. Or are they doing bad things? And this is important. The modifiability of of the microbiome is really important because, we've gone down this road of antidepressants. We've gone down the Prozac road and the Zoloft road, and, there's dozens of them now. And we know it hasn't worked well for people. And we've known that for a long time. I use this slide a lot because it's 2009. Just to point the finger and say, we've known for a long time that antidepressants don't work particularly well for most people. And that's not that they don't work well for some people. They don't work well or at all for most people. And that's very frustrating. But if we can think in a more holistic way, that this isn't a brain problem, right? It isn't a neurotransmitter problem in your brain. Oh, not just that. It might be that you have a neurotransmitter problem in your brain, but you're also overinflamed, or you're also immune deficient, or you also have leaky gut, or you're also have a dysbiotic microbiome, or you get the idea. It's a multifactorial problem. It's not one thing that's off, your serotonin. It could be multiple things that are off. And because of that multifactorial problem, we need a multifactorial solution. And that's exactly what a gut-brain axis intervention is all about. One way to show that, which is just sort of a fun way to do it, these are some of the very early studies that have been done. We can do a microbiome transplant. And the early studies were done in mice. Nowadays, we can actually do them in certain clinical settings in humans. And what you do is you take the microbiome from one creature and put it into another creature. It's very similar to just doing a complete software switch. And so here's some examples. You take an obese mouse, and you take their microbiome and you put it into a lean mouse, and that lean mouse becomes an obese mouse. They take on every characteristic of obesity. They're hungrier, they're seeking out more food, they're better at storing fat, it's more difficult for them to lose fat, all because of what you did with their microbiome. It goes the other way too. You can take the microbiome from a lean mouse and put it into an obese mouse, and that obese mouse loses weight. They become more physically active. They like to run on the wheel. They're not as interested in their food anymore. So it like that should be like blow your mind that the bacteria can change something that is so dramatic. It changes the metabolism, it changes the behavior, it changes everything about that creature because of what is happening at the level of those bacteria, your microbiome. We can do it for psychological indices too. We can take the microbiome from an introverted mouse, right? A mouse that likes to hide in the corner and doesn't want to play with its litter mates and doesn't go out to explore the maze and things like that. We can take that and put it into an extroverted mouse, a mouse that does like to get on the wheel and does like to play with its mates and does like to explore the different parts of its living environment. And the introverted microbiome makes that extrovert an introvert. So now it wants to hide and it doesn't want to play and it doesn't want to socialize and things like that. But again, it goes the other way. And you might look at these studies and go, well, these are mice. How does that impact on me as a stressed out human during Stress Awareness Month? Well, it does impact you because we've also been able to take a microbiome from a depressed human and put that into a non-depressed mouse. And what you end up seeing is that mouse becomes depressed. And it's because of the different kinds of bacteria that are there. It's because of the different kinds of biomolecules that the bacteria are producing. The depressed, think of it this way: the depressed bacteria might be making you depressed because they're making more inflammatory compounds, which lead to neuroinflammation, which leads to depression. It could be that they're not making enough short chain fatty acids. It could be that they're damaging the gut integrity, and that's leading to autoimmune system problems, which can lead to depression and anxiety. So there's a lot of sort of biochemical dominoes that need to fall from the bacteria to what actually happens in the brain, but we're teasing all of those out. And sometimes it's these rodent studies that help us tease that out. And sometimes it's human studies where we can actually now go in to somebody who feels crummy and we can say, eat more of this kind of prebiotic fiber, and we can see how they feel, or supplement with this specific strain of psychobiotic bacteria, and then let's see how you feel after 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And I'm gonna unpack some of that for you as we go through. So things we can do with the nervous system, like the vagus nerve, things we can do with the bacteria, like the microbiome. It changes the complete signaling across that gut-brain axis. And remember, it's not just one thing. It's not just one bacteria. It's not just the gut integrity. It's not just your inflammatory profile. It's not just your neurotransmitter signaling. It's all of that. And we really have to think of this as a system, as a coordinated system. And if we think of it that way, and if we address it that way, we can get results that are life-changing, that are nearly miraculous, where people will, get up in front of audiences and say, here's where I was before, here's where I am now, and I never want to go back there because my life is completely changed. You become a different person, a better version of whoever you are because of what we can change in terms of this signaling. And we can change it in a good way. You can change it in a bad way. And we're gonna talk about some of those as we go through here. So we talked about the vagus nerve. We talked about the microbiome itself. Let's talk about the gut tissue real quick, right? Let's talk about gut integrity, because that can be a big piece of this overall puzzle. So let me orient you to what this leaky gut syndrome slide is showing you. It's showing you on the left-hand side of this graphic a normal tight junction. Your intestinal cells kind of look like little bricks, right? They should be tight up against each other. That tight junction you can think of as the mortar between two bricks that are holding the bricks together. If that mortar becomes broken or dysfunctional, we call it leaky. And that's what you see on the right-hand side. So this is leaky and inflamed cells. So if there's a leak there, things that are supposed to stay in the intestinal lumen can get across into the systemic circulation. That leads to your immune system reacting to it. It leads to inflammation. It can lead to an autoimmune system condition, like what I kind of described a few minutes ago about type 1 diabetes and things like that. Might actually be problems with leaky gut. Leaky gut can be caused by a lot of things. It can be caused by all the things that you see up here. The foods that we eat, the antibiotics that we're exposed to, different toxins in the environment, heavy metals and, pesticides and pharmaceuticals and things like that, but also by lifestyle. Pregnancy can lead to leaky gut. That's one of the reasons that a lot of women post-pregnancy will develop autoimmune system conditions like rheumatoid arthritis or Hashimoto's thyroiditis, or fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, after pregnancy, because this has led to leaky gut, and that has led to all that biochemistry I just described. Just being stressed out can lead to leaky gut. We know that the stress in the brain actually causes stress in the second brain, and once you damage that gut lining, the stress in the second brain then causes stress in the first brain. So you get into this very vicious cycle that you have to short circuit at the entire gut-brain axis. Menopause, this is one of the reasons that women who go through menopause end up gaining weight at a much higher rate than they did pre-menopause, because they have problems here with leaky gut. So it can be a big, big problem. And it's a problem that we've known about for long enough where it's very sort of like connect the dots. We know that something like the standard American diet can change your bacteria, that can increase permeability. So that's the leaky gut piece. It can lead to something called LPS absorption. LPS stands for lipopolysaccharide. This is like a cell wall that has gotten across into the systemic circulation. That leads to a condition called endotoxemia. That leads to inflammation. That leads to metabolic disorders. So just because you're eating the standard American diet, you're developing something like diabetes or prediabetes or obesity or any of those metabolic problems. And it's not because of the calories in that Happy Meal. It's because of what it's doing biochemically to your gut lining and your bacteria and et cetera, et cetera. But we also know how to fix that. We can take away that standard American diet and reduce the damage, or we can go in or we can go in and we can give you something like this. A PR diet is a polyphenol rich diet. This is an anti-leaky gut diet that's been through a number of different clinical trials now. So a polyphenol rich diet is going to be high in things like apples and pomegranates and green tea and cocoa and coffee and citrus and berries and things like that, right? Sounds pretty delicious to me. So if you have more of those foods, you're going to grow more of the good bacteria. You're going to tighten up those tight junctions. You're going to reduce the load on your immune system. That's going to reduce your inflammatory load, and your body's going to be able to shift out of sympathetic into parasympathetic. You're going to be able to repair your damage that is in all your tissues, in your neurons and in your gut lining and in your immune system, and et cetera, et cetera. And you end up producing more short chain fatty acids. You have a metabolic benefit. You have a psychological benefit. You have a physical performance benefit. You probably have a longevity benefit. That's really difficult to measure in humans. We can measure it in rodents. We can measure it in worms. We can measure it in flies. And this style of nourishment improves longevity and improves health span in all those species. So there's a lot to like about this way of eating. I'm going to come back to eating in a little bit, but let's take a beat right here. Right, there's things we can do with our vagus nerve. There's things we can do at the level of our microbiome. There's things we can do at the level of our gut integrity. But each one of those is, deep breathing or having a meditation practice or, eating more fiber or having a whole polyphenol rich diet. That sounds like work, right? For a lot of people, right? Some people will hear me say that kind of stuff and they're like, isn't there just a pill that I can take, right? If you're watching from the United States, right? April is Stress Awareness Month in the United States, and we all want the easy approach. I want the easy approach too, right? I want the easy button. And so people always ask me as I'm talking about this kind of stuff, can I just take a supplement? Isn't there just a probiotic that I can take? And yeah, there is. There's a probiotic you can take, and there's a prebiotic fiber you can take, and there's a phytobiotic supplement, which is a plant extract that has some of these benefits that you can take. But I want to put it in the proper context, right? This is something I've been advocating for more than 20 years. Since my very, very first book that came out, I've been talking about something that I call the SENSE program. SENSE, SENSE, supplements, exercise, nutrition, sleep, and evaluation. And supplements, you see, are just one piece of the puzzle. I have never advocated that somebody can just take the pill and then just sit back on the couch and wait for everything to magically happen, right? The supplement will do something, but if you put it in the proper context, remember I talked a few minutes ago about taking a systems approach? If you take a systems approach, you're going to get a much better overall experience. But supplements are first, because if you have a properly formulated supplement that improves your motivation and your energy levels, maybe you'll become more physically active and you'll get the exercise piece down. If you take a properly formulated supplement that helps with your appetite and your craving modulation, maybe then you'll be able to get on the Mediterranean diet that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And that's going to give you some additional benefits. You get a supplement that helps with your relaxation and your recovery and your ability to unwind at the end of the day. And that's going to help you with your sleep quality. And that's going to give you additional benefits. So the more you can do a little bit of each of these in a coordinated fashion, taking that systemic systems approach, the benefit, the overall benefits are going to be compounded. So instead of 1 + 1 = 2, you're going to get 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 = 57, instead, because they're truly synergistic in how they work. Okay. So what might those supplements be? We can think of probiotic supplements, and there's a gazillion different probiotic supplements out there right now. I have a health practitioners database that I use for looking at different dietary supplements. And I just, for funsies, I went in one day and I typed in probiotics, and it came back with almost 1,200 different finished products that were in the probiotic category. And some of them were for helping you with diarrhea. Some were helping you with constipation. Some were helping you with gut motility. Some were helping with your immune system. Some were helping with all kinds of different things. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that there are lots and lots of different things that probiotics can do, but it's all dependent on the strain of the probiotic. So here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different strains. These are sort of like general wellness strains. Bifidobacterium bifidum BB6. The strain designation is BB6. The strain designation of this one down here, Lactobacillus rhamnosus, is LR32. This will become important as we go through this little section where I'm going to be talking about probiotics. You have to know the strain designation if you hope to know at all what this probiotic is going to do for you. So here are a few examples. Here are some you probably know. You've probably seen these in the store before. So here's one, Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG is the strain designation. This one you'll find in a product I guarantee is at your grocery store. It's called Culturelle. This is a really good strain to recommend to people if they're battling traveler's diarrhea, right? You go on your vacation to Mexico, you come back, you've got a little bit of Montezuma's Revenge, you can go get some Culturelle, and this specific Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG strain is going to help you have less diarrhea, right? That's a really good thing. There's another strain I'm actually going to talk about on the next slide called Lactobacillus rhamnosus. The strain designation is R001. That one is really good for lowering stress. We know it lowers cortisol, body's primary stress hormone. We know it raises GABA, the body's primary relaxing neurotransmitter. So think about the differences there. R001 is a strain that helps with stress. GG is a strain that helps with traveler's diarrhea. There's another lactobacillus strain, Lactobacillus rhamnosus strain, that the strain designation is GR1, is really good for helping women who have recurrent vaginal yeast infections, right? So think about that. Yeast infections, diarrhea, anxiety. Those are all really different things. You might get some anxiety if you have either of those other two things, but that's beside the point. The strain designation is what determines the difference between all those different flavors, so to speak, of Lactobacillus rhamnosus. So if you stopped the live stream right now and ran off to the store and said, yeah, that guy said something about Lactobacillus rhamnosus something or other, and you just picked up the first Lactobacillus rhamnosus you found, you'd probably get a digestive benefit, maybe. Depending on which one you chose. But if you were looking for help with your yeast infection, or you were looking for help with your stress and anxiety, and you chose the wrong one, you chose the wrong tool for the job. You chose a hammer when you really needed a screwdriver, right? That's the importance of strain specificity. You can see some of the other ones here. Bifidobacterium lactis, strain designation here, DN173010. I didn't say they were easy, but that's the strain designation. This is the strain that's in Activia yogurt that helps you poop. So this one keeps you from pooping. This one helps you poop. Here's another one, Bifidobacterium longum 35624. This is in a product called Align, which is a really nice one to help with your immune system vigilance. So you can see, like, even these mainstream, grocery store probiotic strains do vastly different things. And you can't just go in and say, like, oh, well, I bought the one that was on sale and now I'm taking a probiotic. You really have to think about that strain designation. Here are 3 that are in a category that we call psychobiotics. Lactobacillus rhamnosus R0011, that's the one that I just mentioned, lowers cortisol, raises GABA. You could think of this as a stress controller. You can think of this next one, Bifidobacterium longum 175, as a way to reduce anxiety. This other one, Lactobacillus helveticus 52, reduces depression. So the combination of this one, Bifidobacterium longum 175, and Lactobacillus helveticus 52, that's in a product called Cerebiome. I talked about that earlier as one of the early leading psychobiotics that is out there. I've formulated with that before. Cerebiome is a great product. You can go Google it right now and find lots of products that use Cerebiome to lower anxiety and lower depression. Or said the other way, improve your calmness and improve your happiness. Right. So you can think of it as like getting rid of a bad negative mood state or accentuating a positive happy mood state. I take Cerebiome every morning to help me, do what I do with a smile on my face. Okay. So that's probiotics. We can also get into the weeds of, what do we do on top of that? Do we do prebiotics? Prebiotics you can think of as the fibers that are the food for the probiotics, the food for the bacteria. Bacteria love fiber. And if we're not eating fiber, like eating a processed food diet, that's a problem because you're starving the bacteria that we want to nourish so that they make the kinds of things that we want. So they make the short chain fatty acids and they make the neurotransmitters and things like that. So, prebiotics are equally important, but for different ways than what probiotics are. And you'll find products now in the market that will combine those probiotics and prebiotics into what are called symbiotics, synergistic biotics, because then you can get something that makes you happier and maybe more resilient at the same time because you're combining different aspects of biochemistry. There's another category that is fairly new. You may or may not have heard of this, called postbiotics. Postbiotics are the actual things that the bacteria are producing. So, short chain fatty acids would be a good example of that. There are ways that we can, instead of giving you the bacteria that make the short chain fatty acid, so you make more of it, we can actually give you the short chain fatty acid directly. So you can take it or you can make it or you can do both. So the probiotics a lot of times are these signaling molecules that come from the metabolism that's happening at the level of the microbiome. There's another category too that's not on this slide that I refer to as phytobiotics. It's the idea of using plant extracts, phytonutrients, flavonoids, polyphenols, carotenoids, thiols, things like that we find in plants that we can use those to have a biotic effect. They can sometimes accentuate the growth or promote the growth of good bacteria. They can de-emphasize or interfere with the growth of the bad bacteria. They might help with your gut lining, your gut integrity. They might help grow your mucus lining. They might have a signaling effect across the gut-brain axis. So phytobiotics are sort of a new and emerging way that we can use plants to change the signaling across the gut-brain axis. But if we're going to go back a little bit and talk about prebiotics, we want to make sure we're matching them up. So certain bacterial strains will prefer certain kinds of fibers and not prefer other kinds of fibers. So here's an example of that. Of those 3 psychobiotics that I just listed on the last slide, the lactobacilli species like to eat things like oligosaccharides, like isomalto-oligosaccharides. This is sometimes called an IMO. So an IMO is going to feed all of them. It's going to feed all the good guys. It'll also feed some of the bad guys. So you have to watch for that a little bit. Something like a galacto-oligosaccharide, and here I have one brand name called Bimuno that I've used before. This GOS, G-O-S, is primarily going to feed the bifidobacteriums. Bifidos are kind of the workhorse. They're the thing that they're the ones that are making a lot of these neurochemicals that we want more of. So you definitely want more of these bifidos. Something like galactomannan, brand name Sunfiber, is feeding the lactose. So certain fibers are going to feed certain strains. You want to be able to have a diversity of fibers so you can feed a diversity of strains. And that by doing that, you're going to get a diversity of these positive signaling molecules. We're gonna get more into this a little bit as we go through. So what happens when you put this to the test? Here's another study that my group did a couple of years ago. So this is, well, more than a couple of years ago now, coming up on 5 years. Modulation of the gut-brain axis improves microbiome, metabolism, and mood. And I'm only going to show you the results and our conclusions, right? Just in the interest of time. We're already a little bit over time. What we did here was we did an intervention where we gave a group of people, again, moderately stressed people, we gave them a cocktail of probiotics and prebiotics and different phytobiotics and things like that, and we measured what happened over time. This was a 6-week intervention, and what we showed, our results showed, well, the microbiome changed. There were positive effects at the level of the microbiome, increases in populations of good bacteria, a change in the ratio between certain kinds of bacteria that actually made these people more likely to lose weight. Our group actually just finished a trial that's in peer review right now for publication, where we used a strain of bacteria that changed this ratio between the good guys and the bad guys to make people lose more weight. So there's an aspect of helping people lose weight. There's an aspect of helping people prevent weight regain. All that happens at the level of your microbiome. Their metabolism was better. They had better glycemic control. Their blood sugar levels were lower. Their inflammatory markers were lower. We saw lower stress hormones like cortisol. We saw increases in things like butyrate kinase. So if you're going to be making short chain fatty acids, you need to have plenty of butyrate kinase on board. That's the enzyme whereby we're able to make butyrate, which is one of the most important short chain fatty acids. Cholesterols went down, cardiac indexes improved, so metabolism was a lot better. And then psychology was improved. Positive mood states were going up. People were feeling more happy, and negative mood states were going down. People were feeling less tense and less anxious and less irritable and less sad and things like that. So this really brings it all together, that if you intervene at the level of the microbiome appropriately, you're able to change the microbial, you're able to change the biochemical, you're able to change the metabolic, and you're able to change the psychology of those people. And all they did was consume the right ingredients to change the signaling across their entire gut-brain axis, right? That's the easy button right there. But I'll tell you what I think also happened. I think the reason that we got such good results was because we did that. We gave the supplement. Remember the Sense program I showed you before? We gave the supplement and stepped back. And we observed what happened. We did all our measurements, but I think what we were observing is that people felt so much better that they started eating better. They felt so much better that they started moving more. They felt so much better, and their stress levels were down and their relaxation levels were up, that they were getting better sleep quality. Now, this particular trial wasn't designed to put them on a diet or put them on an exercise regimen or change their sleep hygiene or any of that kind of stuff. It was a real world study where we said, take these supplements and we're going to see what happens over time. And good things happened over time, right? Which is what everybody wants. But I think it really was a true Sense program kind of an effect, almost at a subconscious level, because we told the people, please don't change your diet. Please don't start an exercise regimen. Just be yourselves. But they couldn't help it, right? You just felt better, so they started behaving better, right? So we're seeing this more and more and more. If we can get people to feel better, they make better decisions in their life. Okay. Another example of that, and this is a very stark example, is the case of autism, where we've been able to see in a range of clinical trials that have happened over the last few years, we've been able to see things like this. So this graphic that you see is based on data from numerous rodent studies, but we're starting to see the same thing in human trials, which I'll show you in just a second. And it goes step by step like this. You get mice with autism features, and you do a probiotic or a prebiotic intervention that changes their microbiome, changes the bacteria, changes what bacteria are there, changes what they're doing metabolically. That improves their epithelial function, right? It improves their barrier integrity. It reduces their leaky gut. As a result of that, they have less inflammation. They have better signaling across their axis, right? That's what these metabolites are. And as a result of that, you're changing their autism related behaviors, right? So this has been done in rodents multiple times. It's been done in humans a few times. That if you change the microbiome, you change the behavior of the organism. And we're starting to see this in human trials. Here's a trial that was done, a prebiotic intervention study in children with autism spectrum disorders, ASDs. This was done in 2018, so quite a while ago now. Here's another one looking at the same sort of an intervention in autistic kids using a different kind of fiber, partially hydrolyzed guar gum. So in this prebiotic intervention, they used a GOS, GOS, a galacto-oligosaccharide. Remember on a slide just a few minutes ago, I talked about one called Bimuno. This is the one they used in this trial. This one, the partially hydrolyzed guar gum, is also sometimes called a galactomannan. This was the sun fiber that I mentioned on a slide earlier. And what they found was in these trials, we give the fiber, it changes the microbiome, it changes the gut integrity, it changes the signals that come across into the axis, it changes the behavior. And so in both of these studies, the kids not only had better gut function, right? A lot of times kids with autism will have gut problems and psychological problems, right? A true gut-brain axis dysfunction. So they had less gastrointestinal problems, they had less constipation, they had less food intolerances, and they behaved better. Less acting out, less irritability, less all that kind of stuff from a fiber intervention, right? I want to say that again. The only intervention here that improved the behavior of these kids with autism was eat this fiber, right? And I say it like in a very simplistic way like that because that's what the intervention was. This study was done in the UK with the GOS. This study with the galactomannan with the guar gum was done in Japan. And we're seeing more and more of this kind of stuff. If we change what we're feeding our bodies, especially what we're feeding our bacteria, we're changing behavior, we're changing performance, we're changing our resilience, we're changing everything. It's absolutely mind-blowing how the research is really catching up with, what your grandma told you, which was vegetables, right? And there's all kinds of ways that we can use functional nutrition in a very precision nutrition way now to help us be more resilient in this stressful world. So let's talk about what we need to do, right? I told you this was going to be very practical. That's the science part of it. Now I want to talk to you guys a little bit for the next few minutes about what do you do? How do you take the science and how do you apply it? Whether you're a certified mental wellness coach and you're coaching clients, or you just want to do it with yourself or with your family or whoever, there's a couple of really practical things that we can do. So the first one is you need to close that fiber gap. Almost all of us, myself included, have a fiber deficiency. We are not getting nearly enough fiber in our diets. The recommendations for fiber, at least in the United States, are around 30 to 45 grams, depending on men, women, body size, that kind of stuff. But most of us are only getting about 15, and lots of us are getting way, way less than that. And the main reason for that is that we're not eating enough fruits and vegetables. We're not eating enough whole grains. We're eating too many processed foods and not enough whole foods. And if we can just slowly increase our intake of leafy greens and brightly colored fruits and vegetables, and kind of the things that you see here. I talk about this all the time, and there's all kinds of ways that we can increase our fiber intake. You don't want to go from 15 grams to 150 grams between today and tomorrow, right? If you're going to do more fiber, do it, add an additional serving every day. Have a piece of fruit today and a salad tomorrow and a handful of nuts, and do it progressively so your gut can adjust to it, so you don't feel bloated and constipated and all that kind of stuff. Your gut will adapt over time. Go slow. Make sure you hydrate so that fiber moves through. Make sure you get a diversity of different fiber types. Don't just go and say, oh, I'm going to mix up some Metamucil in my glass and that's going to be my fiber intake. You can certainly do that one serving if you want to, but make sure you're getting a diversity. I'll talk more about why diversity is important in just a little bit. and make sure you're trying to get less of the standard American diet. Standard American diet says sad because it makes us sad. It's full of all this stuff that not only has a detrimental effect directly, but it has an indirect detrimental effect, because if we're eating this, we're not eating fruits and vegetables. And if we're not eating the fruits and vegetables, we're not getting the fibers that are nourishing our good bacteria. So we're starving them. This kind of diet is feeding bad bacteria and not feeding or starving good bacteria. So the more that we're eating this kind of processed food, the worse we're doing for our microbiome, and the worse we're doing for our signals across our gut-brain axis, and the worse we're doing for our overall mental wellness and our stress levels and our stress resilience, and et cetera, et cetera. So if you look at what any industrialized population is eating right now, these data come from the USDA, so they're very American specific, but any industrialized country is doing pretty much the same thing, which is getting too many of your calories from processed food and not enough of your calories from less processed food. And so if we can just shrink that a little bit, if we can take away a little bit of processed and replace that with a little bit of less processed, that's going to go a long way, because you're taking away a bad signal and replacing it with a good signal, and that is permeating through your whole gut-brain axis. And it looks like this. All the coaches that are watching right now are going to groan because they see this slide in virtually every seminar that I do, every weekly seminar, because there's so much great information on this. Every single time we eat, we have a choice to be able to say we're going to send good signals across our gut-brain axis or bad signals. And let me explain to you why they're good signals and why they're bad signals. Because if you're eating fermented food, for example, that signal is going all the way from your microbiome, from your bacteria, to your mucus lining, to your gut lining, to your gut integrity. That's the leaky gut piece we talked about. To your immune system, to your inflammatory cascade, to your blood-brain barrier, to your neurons. And if you're eating, I'm going to say this very simplistically, if you're eating yogurt, you are promoting neurogenesis and neuroprotection in your brain. Right? You're growing new neurons. You're protecting the neurons that are there. You're saving your brain by eating yogurt, right? Obviously, I'm saying this very simplistically for effect. If you're eating cupcakes, on the other hand, you're feeding different nutrients to your microbiome. That's going to be bad for your gut bacteria. It's going to be bad for your mucus lining. It's going to be bad for your gut integrity, bad for your immune system overactivation, bad for your level of chronic inflammation, bad for your blood-brain barrier. If you have leaky gut, you probably have leaky brain, and that's going to lead to neuroinflammation, which leads to depression and anxiety, and neurodegeneration, which is another way of saying Alzheimer's disease or senile dementia, right? So like the cupcakes are leading you towards Alzheimer's, and the yogurt is leading you towards a creative genius, right? Again, saying it for effect, right? But every time we eat, we have a chance to modulate those signals one direction or another direction. And that's one of the reasons that I really love recommending the Mediterranean diet, or not the Mediterranean diet, a Mediterranean style way of eating. So you can see the Mediterranean diet pyramid on your screen right now. You can see that it's lots and lots of fruits and vegetables. It's an appreciable amount of seafood protein. There's dairy products. There's poultry. No one can eat eggs anymore because they're too expensive. Ha ha ha. But things at the top of the pyramid are not forbidden. Red meats and sweets and snacks and things like that. They're just less often, right? They're things that we're minimizing. You can also see a Mediterranean diet pyramid has social connection and moving your body and eating with others and things like that. So what I did when I wrote this book, Mental Fitness, I created my own mental fitness diet pyramid based largely on the Mediterranean diet, but also bringing in components of the blue zones and the Okinawan diet and the Scandinavian diet and the anti-inflammatory diet, and like all the diets that have really good research on them to create something that has sort of the best of all the science-based diets. But the Mediterranean diet really is the winner. Every year, U.S. News and World Report does a best diets issue where they categorize everything. And the Mediterranean diet, or the Mediterranean style of eating, has won for 8 years in a row because it has really good data for preventing heart disease and stroke and Alzheimer's, and helping people with weight loss, and preventing diabetes and rheumatoid arthritis and cancer and depression. We've just talked about every single one of these things in the course leading up to where we are right now in this seminar. And it's all because, not all, but it's in large part due to what it's doing at the microbiome and across the entire gut-brain axis, which involves your nervous system and your circulatory system and your immune system, and et cetera, et cetera. So here's what the mental wellness food pyramid looks like. That's in the mental fitness book. It comes along with a grocery list, so you can take that to the grocery store and stock up your pantry. Here's what it looks like on a plate. And you see on the plate, your fruit and vegetables are taking up half your plate. You're getting some good whole grains. You're getting some good protein from dairy. You're getting some healthy fats, your avocados and your seeds and your nuts and all that kind of stuff. The only thing that we're limiting, but not avoiding completely, are things like red meats, especially processed meats like hot dogs and cold cuts and bacon and things like that. And we're trying to limit our intake of sugar, primarily sodas. So it really is not a very restrictive way of eating at all. Something that I recommend a lot is for people to try what I call the 30 plant challenge. This gets to the core of that idea of diversity. If we can eat a highly diverse plant-based diet, 30 plants eaten within 7 days, within a 1-week time period. And this can be vegetables and fruits and seeds and nuts, but also spices. Every time you choose a different plant, it's going to nourish a different category of bacteria in your microbiome. And that's going to be responsible for producing a different kind of bioactive molecule. It might be GABA that helps us relax. It might be short chain fatty acids that help with our immune system and our blood sugar control. It might be et cetera, et cetera. So the more diversity you get in your diet, the more diversity you get in your microbiome, the more diversity you get in terms of signaling across the gut-brain axis. And that's the core of us being resilient. It's our ability to show up in a stressful situation and being able to activate whatever we need to activate on demand. Sometimes I describe the microbiome as an internal, on-demand natural pharmacy, that if you need more serotonin, it'll make it. If you need more GABA, it'll make it. If you need to put the foot on the accelerator for the sympathetic nervous system activation, you'll be able to do that. If you need to take your foot off and shift down into parasympathetic rest and digest, it'll do that, right? It is this on-demand internal natural pharmacy that we have the ability every single time we choose a meal or a snack to take it one way or another way. We have the ability to choose how we feel based on, are we choosing a Western diet? Are we choosing a more prudent, balanced diet that is lower in processed food and higher in less processed food? So it really gets as simple as that. So in my book, Mental Fitness book, I've got some recipes and I've got some grocery lists and I've got some strategies for eating and things like that. If you hit my website, doctalbot.com, we've got link outs to different places you can get more information. These are 2 books that I recommend also. Brain Changer, very science-based, very Mediterranean diet focused. This is Your Food on Brain. Has a lot of really good recipes in it, but they're all in the same genre of what we feed ourselves. This idea of nutritional psychology can really change what our overall outlook and behavior and resilience is. So if I had to summarize all of that, what are you going to feed your 3 brains, right? The brain in your head, the brain in your gut, the brain in your heart. It really comes down to a few really simple practices. Eat more fiber. What I call the 3 Fs: fiber, fermented foods, and flavonoids is a challenge that I put out there every once in a while. 30 plant challenge is one way to do that. But adding a fermented food, adding a yogurt, adding a kombucha, adding a a kimchi with your meals, getting more fibers either from fruits and vegetables, or, get a GOS supplement, or get a galactomannan supplement, or something like that. Eat fewer processed foods. If you can just take out, one of those fast food eating occasions, great. Don't take them all out, right? Let's be realistic here, right? I'm filming this on a Friday. Friday for us a lot of times is pizza night. Sometimes we'll get a pizza. Sometimes we'll make a pizza. We have a really cool pizza oven, and we'll do really nice dough, and we'll do really nice sauce, and we'll fill it with vegetables and peppers and onions and tomatoes. And, when it comes out, we might put a handful of arugula on top of it. That's a great way to make pizza night a little bit, a little bit less processed and a little more high fiber, so you can be fun with that kind of stuff too. Move your bodies, especially outside in the sun. I'm not going to talk about it today, but just being outside in the sun going into your eyeballs is gonna stimulate the production of serotonin, so you'll be happier during the day, and then later on melatonin, the darkness signal, so you're gonna have a better quality of sleep. And movement can change what's happening in your microbiome. We can look at your microbiome, and with reasonable accuracy, we can tell you, are you sedentary, or are you a weekend warrior, or are you an athlete? Just by looking at your microbiome, because there's a linkage between moving your body and changing the architecture and the functionality of your microbiome. So movement is really important for our overall stress resilience. Sleep is really, really important. One of the things we know about sleep is that, we have this 24-hour circadian rhythm. We're awake for a certain part of the 24-hour cycle, or asleep for a certain part of the 24-hour cycle. And our body is doing different things when we're awake and when we're asleep. Same thing happens with your microbiome. Your microbiome has a circadian rhythm to it. And so when you're awake during the day, it's doing certain things. When you're asleep at night, it's doing other certain things. And so, at night, hopefully the 8 hours that you're sleeping, this is when your brain and your head is cleaning itself. This is when your gut is cleaning itself. I just wrote about that the other day, the migrating motor complex of how your gut cleans out all that debris and really sets up the microbiome in the place for its ultimate success. Sleep can change your microbiome, and your microbiome can change your sleep, as I discussed. If you're irritated and ruminating and your head is going, that is something you can calm by doing things in your microbiome and your gut-brain axis. Breathe. We talked about the idea of using breath work to activate and tone your vagus nerve. So something as simple as box breathing, where you're breathing in for 4 and you're holding it for 4, and you're breathing out for 4 and you're holding it for 4. There's a zillion flavors of box breathing, or breath work, and you can do it when you're sitting at the traffic light waiting for the red light to change. You can do it when you're waiting in line at the grocery store. You can do it, when you're sitting on a webinar, when you're listening, getting information. You can do your breath work. That can change what's happening across the gut-brain axis because of what it's doing to your vagus nerve. We have to think the right way. We have a whole module a whole chapter in the book, and a whole module in the Certified Mental Wellness Coach course about mindset. We have to change or at least modulate the thoughts that we're feeding to our head. And that can be meditations. It can be mindfulness. It can be getting yourself into a mindset of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. It can be having a gratitude practice. It can be all kinds of different things, because what happens in this brain gets transmitted down to the second brain. And if you're causing a lot of stress damage in the second brain, that's going to reflect it back up and cause a stress response in the first brain. And then we can do targeted supplementation. Some of the things that I've just covered. We can take strain specific prebiotics. We can have structure specific prebiotics. The right structure matching up with the right strain can give you that symbiotic that can be really, really meaningful in its overall effects. We can use research-backed phytonutrients. They're phytonutrients that we talk about in the coach course, where they might have an immediate effect. Things like theanine, for example, within an hour can take you from being irritable and agitated and put you in a state of relaxed alertness, what you might call the zone. There's other things that might take a week to work. And in that week, we can improve your memory. We can improve your creativity, and we can improve your mental focus. Things like pomegranate extract and saffron and kanna can improve your overall resilience. And while things like probiotics and prebiotics, those might take a month to work, right? Because we're changing the architecture of your microbiome and changing the production of neurotransmitters and inflammatory markers and things like that. So that's what I call phased benefits. Some things can work the day you take them. Some things can work the week you take them. Some things can work a month or two of taking them, just based on what we're trying to modulate across the gut-brain axis. So there is hope out there during Stress Awareness Month for us to understand the science, educate people about that science, whether they're just people who are around us or they're our clients, that we're teaching as certified mental wellness coaches. I encourage you. Check out my website, doctalbot.com. We've got free stuff. We've got all kinds of videos that we have. You're here on the YouTube page, so you can see the videos that we post here. Consider signing up for some of our courses. Consider downloading some of our resources, like the Level Up ebook about nootropics and adaptogens and psychobiotics and leveling up your performance and things like that. And by all means, check out Three Waves Wellness, and come visit us for one of our retreats. We're just about to schedule a resilience retreat in the month of May. And so, we'll post that up. So keep your eyes posted if you want to come here and learn some of this stuff in person. Okay. Thanks so much for joining me today for this, our first YouTube live. And I hope if you're watching this on the replay, comment below and let me know what other topics you'd like me to cover in this channel. Okay. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.